Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me for another episode. Matt Hamilton is my name for those of you who are unfamiliar. And today we're going to be talking about a real bugbear when it comes to organizations and leadership, and that is the topic of change, leading through change. Traditionally something that organizations and leaders are horrifically poor at, and there are a couple of key reasons for that. But what we need to get down to is the reason why people fear change in organizations and why it creates so many dramas. Now, I did actually do a fair bit of research on this topic, and it was really interesting to note that there's some research showing that the use of antidepressants and antipsychotic medications actually skyrockets in the workforce during periods of organizational change. Now, that's quite alarming, but you can see why from a logical perspective that might be occurring. You've got all this uncertainty, which people are known to hate. You've got this fear of, oh my God, the organization's changing. That means restructures. That means I could potentially lose my job. That's a stressor in and of itself. I mean, most people have a mortgage to pay and they've got to put food on the table. Okay. So this uncertainty associated with organizational change is not something to be taken lightly. Okay, it's really important. But then on top of that, change, because of the nature of it, right? The very nature of it is that it's uncertain. And so you'll have these change initiatives often being led by very senior people within the organization, and perhaps even your manager, okay, or even second line report sometimes, doesn't really have a full picture of what that change means. It's all uncertain. And so for the average worker, when they see that their managers don't even really know the full extent of the change going on, it can be very unsettling. Okay, so as leaders, what are our set of responsibilities to try and mitigate the stress and guide organizations through these periods of change, and to make sure that it's done as successfully as possible? And the big one that comes to the fore is communication. Now, communication as a leader, as a person, is absolutely crucial, even during just normal times. And traditionally, it's not something that we're very good at, right? But as a leader, communication is essential, especially during times of organizational upheaval and change. And that is in large part to win or reaffirm your team's trust in you. Because there's this fear that you're not going to be transparent. You know, change is often seen as this cloak and dagger sort of thing. You know, there's going to be redundancies, or there's going to be, org chart restructuring. You know, they're looking to get rid of people. And in the absence of good communication, we see this all the time. In the absence of good communication, people make up their own minds as to what's going on. And the rumor mill starts up. And Chinese whispers start doing the rounds. And all of a sudden, you've got this really, inaccurate version of what's going on talked about as common knowledge in the workforce. And that is purely because management have not filled that void with good, targeted, consistent communication. Okay, so that communication needs to be consistent from the very top all the way down through the management ranks. Okay, but what you guys will often find is that places aren't as organized as that. Okay, go and do the research on Google Scholar. You'd be surprised to see how many papers have been written that detail examples of organizations that really don't do change very well. You don't even have to go and consult the research. You can probably delve back into your memory if you've been around long enough career-wise, and you can think of plenty of examples where change has occurred in the workforce and it has been done in a really terrible fashion. It just seems to be something we're not good at. All right. So let's say you're a senior, not even a senior manager. Let's say you're a middle manager. You've got a small team. There's some change coming in because a new CEO is looking to shake things up a little bit. You don't really know what's going on. Your boss doesn't really know what's going on. Communication's not really flowing down to you, but you've got a lot of people underneath you who want answers. What's your responsibility in all this? What's your role? Okay, what can you do? Well, what you can do is understand the role that communication plays. Communication doesn't necessitate that you have all the answers. Okay? What people need in times like those, times of uncertainty, is reassurance. Hey, my manager's being transparent with me. I don't have to approach him or her and ask what's going on. They take the initiative in team meetings and they acknowledge the change. And they acknowledge the unsettling nature of it. Not only on the workforce, but maybe on them as a human as well. And connecting with people on that level, while it's not a perfect solution, it certainly goes a long way to establishing trust. Now, you should have that already if you've been diligent about your leadership, but it reestablishes it. It shows that you're not afraid to deal with the elephant in the room and acknowledge that there is change. And then maybe you can delve down the thinking that's going on within your team. Maybe you can open up the floor and ask people to detail their concerns and be transparent. Say, you can ask me whatever you want. This is a closed environment for just us as a team to have this conversation about our concerns, maybe to detail our gripes. And then people get it out. They see that their manager is being transparent with them, and it sets them more at ease than what they would have been if you went the opposite route and you weren't transparent and you weren't actively trying to communicate with them and give them an avenue to express their concerns and raise their anxieties. Okay, it doesn't mean you have to have the answers, all right? And oftentimes you won't. But acknowledging that change is occurring and perhaps encouraging people to view it as potentially a positive thing is also a key point that I'd like to make. You know, so often we attribute change as being a negative thing, but sometimes it's a fantastic thing. And maybe it's worth reminding your team of that fact, that not all change is bad change. Yes, uncertainty is uncomfortable, but this whole thing might actually turn out to be the best thing that's ever happened to this organization. Maybe those things that, you know, we've said need to change will change as a result of this. So it's opening people up to the possibility that this might actually be a positive and just guiding the mindset. Now, obviously, there's an element of this that you have little control, if any, over, which is the decision that people senior to you make, the decisions they make. But that's okay. We deal with what we can control. And what we can control is our communication, okay, the topics that we choose to focus on, all right? And the care that we show the people that report to us. So proactivity is what I want to focus on. Communication, it's a big, big thing. And it is, in fact, the number one culprit, all right, for change not being handled as well as it could be. It is communication. In times of change, communication must be bolstered. It must be consistent. It must be targeted. It needs to be open. All right, people need an outlet. Guys, I hope that helps. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you for the next one.